Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, men and women, it is I, Dwayne Burns, living, learning, and enjoying life. And I'm definitely enjoying this beautiful Saturday afternoon. I can't wait to go outside and get some vitamin D in me from the sunlight so I can stay healthy. So, this is a, a simple game that I played a little while ago. Sometimes I'll show you a game that I recently played, or I'll show you a game that I played a little while back, and just show you some of the successes and improvements and opportunities to become a better chess player and to show beginners how to play. So we'll get right into it. So I just grabbed this game, so we'll just freestyle it along. So shout out to Kim Keisha if you see this. I'm sure you're a beautiful lady. So I'm not the type of person that overanalyzes positions and is it Ruiz and because so many openings. Basically, an opening is your first few moves, and there are a lot of names for openings, and there are a lot of names for different moves. But one thing that I like to do the most is I like to do what's called pinning the what's called a semi pin. What I like to call a semi pin of the knight, which means that if the knight moves next, then I'm going to eat the queen. So the player recognizes that already and moves their bishop down. So I want to keep that same position anyway. What I should have really done was I should have moved my I should have moved this pawn up, and I'll show you what I'm talking about really quickly. So this pawn right here, I should have moved it here. That way, if this knight moves here, I protect it. But actually, I really didn't have to do that because my queen would have ate it anyway. Okay. So that's something to take into consideration. So he moves there anyway, but the bishop is protecting that knight. So that knight is in good position. So I move it there up anyway. So the knight moves here just to make my king move. You never really want your king to move around on its own, especially early in the game, because you're setting yourself up for a lot of checks and for a lot of pieces to be sacrificed to take your king out of check. Um, in my opinion, for beginners, you want to castle your king as soon as possible. But some people like to get a lot of position without castling the king, especially if the king is not being threatened early on. So that's a good move. So they get because of that they get the free bishop. So I made a mistake there. So of course I'm going to attack. I'm going to threaten the bishop with my knight, and then right there, as you can see, the bishop checks me. Now, the first natural reaction is to eat the knight, eat the bishop up with my knight, but then the queen's going to come in and check. Not only check, but also eat my bishop, and now I'm going to lose even more position. So I want to see if I moved my pawn up, and I didn't. Now I do, and he checks me again. And that's the reason why you don't want your king out in the open like this. So the reason why I just sacrificed my queen there is because you see how it says +1 by Kim Keisha? When you're down -1, -2, or minus down 1, 2, or 3 points, you want to swap out pieces. The reason why you want to do that is because if your opponent has a little bit of an advantage towards you, you want to minimize the board so that way you can move pawns up to promote them to queens if needed, for example. So I do a really good move here because the next move, if he makes a mistake, I can check the king and then eat the queen. So let's see what they do. So they castle. So I'm still going to attack that knight, that rook anyway, and he has to move the rook over. So at this point, that knight has good position, but it's really not threatening anything for now. But that's okay. So I move it back. And then, of course, I get checked. So I move up to attack the knight. I get checked again. So I'm going to move down to protect my bishop. Now, at this point, I'm really not sure what to do. So I'm just going to try to do some additional strategies. So let's see what move I make next. So I eat a pawn and at the same time threaten the bishop to get back in the game. So then they eat a pawn to go back up 1. Now I have what's called, I like to call center of board control. Your knights and bishops, you want to keep them close to the center of the board as much as possible, or attack the center lanes as much as possible, because the more you have the center of the board control, the less movement that the opponent can do. So of course I threaten the bishop with my rook, and of course he surprisingly doesn't move it out of the way. Now I get checked again, so of course I'm going to move over. I'm going to see why I did that. So it really wasn't a smart move. So now I'm down 4, but I can at least eat the bishop. So now the pawn's moving down. So now, as you can see, I want to show you something else. A position that you should always be careful of is to move these 3 pawns as much as possible, because if you let this king be alone, and you can get a rook up here. So what I want to eventually do is get this rook up here, have this rook threaten, get this bishop out of the way, and bring this other rook. Oops. I hate when it does that. There we go. Bring this rook over here as well. Sacrifice this rook. No, if there was only one rook here, to sacrifice this rook to allow this rook to get out of the way some way or another, and then checkmate with this rook here or this one. Those are the sexiest checkmates, especially when you're down. When you do a rook checkmate, especially when you're losing, it's a very good thing to do because the king can't go anywhere. So the king is, even though the king is protected right now, still not in the best position. So let's see what happens next. So I'm playing a little bit of possum. So I want to see if I want to check my opponent's temperature to see if they think if I made a mistake, and they don't jump on it. Now, I'm going to move my rook up to protect my king because the knight wants to checkmate. Knight wants to check. So now the rook is there. To threaten the bishop, and that pawn is going to protect the rook. So I say, okay, I'm going to protect my rook as well. So then now the pawn is trying to turn to a queen. Just like when you play checkers, you're trying to get your checker. You're trying to king your checkers. That's the similarity with chess. You try to, but you don't call it kinging or queening. You call it promoting. When you promote a pawn, the pawn makes it all the way down to the bottom file. Then it could change to either a knight, a bishop, a rook, or a queen. Depending on what you need to do, 9 times out of 10 you want it to be a queen, but if you're trying to avoid a stalemate, you may not want a queen or a rook. So of course I move my bishop down to prevent the promotion. Plus I'm exposing the rook because I'm down 1. So of course they don't bite. So now I'm in a great position. Now I pretty much won the game, and I'm going to show you why. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat the rook. And then the rook has a choice but to eat. Now the king recognizes what's happening. So the king moves over. But the good news is I'm up 4. So now I threaten the rook with my bishop. The only thing the rook can do is just eat it because at this point I won the game. So of course the rook has no choice but to eat my rook, and then I check. Now I check. Now what I should have done, no, I did the right thing. I did the right thing. So now the king has a chance to escape. Now at this point, I'm going to check again. And then now I'm just going to eat pieces. Now I almost forgot about the, I should have left it there because I could have just ate it, but that's okay. Now I'm going to promote my piece. There's a lot of different things I could have done to end the game already, but this is what I just want to do. See, now at this point, my rook is protecting that whole file. Nobody can get to that pawn. And I'm going to promote. Now check. I should have just went for the queen. Now I got a queen, so pretty much the game's over. And that's it. Checkmate. So this game was kind of tricky, but we got the checkmate. We got the job done. So let me know what questions you have about this particular game or chess in particular. Please like and subscribe, and I will talk to you all shortly.